So picking up from our last class, we're going to talk about the four thoughts that turn the mind. And the four thoughts that turn the mind are called the common foundation because they're common to all Buddhist traditions, and they're a traditional way that we prepare ourselves to practice the Dharma. So contemplation of these four thoughts upholds our spiritual practice, just like a foundation upholds a building. And so we want to make sure that we build a very, very strong foundation for any building that we create, right? If we don't develop a strong, unshakable motivation for spiritual practice, then we'll easily forget why we're here. Why we're here praying for all beings instead of partying, or why we're driving out to the boonies on a Sunday afternoon to watch a Dharma teaching instead of staying at home watching Netflix, right? We'll forget if we don't remember our motivation. So without that strong motivation, we easily become distracted or discouraged at just anything that comes up. So to build that solid foundation, we contemplate the four thoughts that turn the mind, which are, does anyone remember? The first one is precious human rebirth. Second one, impermanence and death, yeah. Third, karma, cause and result. And the fourth, suffering and the causes of suffering, yeah. So why do we say these thoughts turn the mind? What is it about our mind that's turning? What does that mean to turn the mind? The reason we contemplate these thoughts is that if you have found a path that you are sure leads to supreme enlightenment, you've checked it out, you can see that it has produced enlightenment and it continues to produce enlightenment that is visible, predictable, and reportable. If you've found that path, then Gyaltrul says, are you able to maintain that path with diligence? That means, are you able to maintain that path in such a way that you don't get that on-again, off-again cyclic involvement that so many people in meditation do? Are you able to remain firm? When you find this path, and it becomes a central focus in your life, in times of both joy and fear, is the path always the answer to your problems? But most of all, you should look to see whether you are certain enough about this path to have it be your source of refuge. Is it the thing you turn to? And do you consistently practice it every day? If all these factors have been met, then your mind has been turned. So we might listen to these teachings over and over and over again, but if that hasn't happened, our mind has not been turned. It can just roll off of us like water off a duck's back, right? It doesn't necessarily go anywhere. But if we really apply them, if we really contemplate them and delve deep into them, then we can turn our minds. So in the last two classes, we talked about the first thought, precious human rebirth. And in this class, we're going to explore the second thought of impermanence. But the two are really connected and interlinked. And so I'd like to start by reviewing some of what we covered in the last two classes. But don't worry, it won't be a test this time. I could see some nervous smiles there. So we contemplate the preciousness of our human birth to develop an appreciation for having both the ability and the freedom to practice the Dharma in this lifetime. It is extremely rare to be born as a human being. We could have been born as any number of things. We could have been born as a lobster or a cat or a cow or a spider or a cricket or an eyelash mite, for all you know. You could be anything. And if you were in any of these other forms, you would probably be so consumed by just the tasks of daily survival, you wouldn't have the ability to think about the Dharma or to think about spiritual practice. And you really wouldn't be able to understand much about spiritual practice anyways. I don't think eyelash mites have much of a chance of contemplating these kinds of thoughts, right? But we could have been born as any number of things. We could have been born in the lower realms, so consumed by our suffering that we can't possibly think of spiritual practice or possibly think of a way to end our suffering. Or we could have been born in the God realms, so blissed out that the thought of escaping cyclic existence never occurs to us. But we're fortunate enough to have been born as human beings. And in the human realm, we have enough suffering to want change, but our suffering isn't so overwhelming that we can't do anything about it. We have the ability to engage in spiritual practice and just enough suffering to motivate us to do so. But even as a human, there are many conditions that we could be born into that would prevent us from taking advantage of this opportunity. We could have been born in a place where the Dharma has not yet been taught. Or we could have been born into a community of hunters or a violent gang and raised to believe that harming others is good. We could have been born with a physical or mental handicap that would prevent us from practicing the Dharma. It could prevent us from learning or understanding, the Dharma. Or we could have been born without any faith, with no interest in faith whatsoever. So there's a long list of afflictions that could prevent one from taking up the Dharma. And it appears that we're all not so afflicted because we're here today, and we're here with good motivation, and we're interested in learning. And that is extremely, extremely rare. And so we should rejoice in that. We should rejoice in everyone that is here present today, and the fact that we are all able to be here with a mind turned towards the Dharma, ready to learn. So it is extremely rare to obtain a human birth, and even rarer to obtain a birth with all the freedoms and advantages, which is to say, without any of the long list of afflictive conditions that would prevent one from taking up the Dharma. It's so rare. And the difficulty of obtaining such a birth is compared to throwing dried peas at a smooth wall and trying to get one to stick. You would be very unlikely that you would be able to get a dried pea to stick to a dry, smooth wall. Or if you were to balance a pile of peas on an upright needle, it would be extremely difficult to balance even a single pea on the tip of a needle, let alone a whole pile of them. And so that is an example of how difficult it is to obtain this human birth. And it's important to remember that we didn't get here by luck, but by hard work. The reason that we have this precious opportunity of this human form is because in past lives, we have abstained from negative thoughts and actions. We've cultivated virtuous thoughts and actions. And we did both of these with the altruistic desire to benefit others. By doing that, we amassed a vast amount of merit. And that amount of merit, coupled with our aspiration to be born in a human birth, is what brought us here today, to this life. But if we don't have all of those qualities and conditions again, it doesn't happen again. It's important that we recognize how rare this opportunity is so that we take advantage of it, and so that we use it well for the benefit of all beings. Becoming aware of the preciousness of this human birth is not intended to inspire us in worldly ways, such as to become smarter or wealthier. It's not like, use this life while you have it, have fun, YOLO, it's not like just live it up while you have it, This is a rare opportunity, and these contemplations have nothing to do with worldly things, nothing to do with worldly values. So this human vessel is our one and only chance to attain enlightenment, to attain the state beyond suffering and to guide all beings to that state. And once we lose this body, we could be born anywhere. We have no control over where we'll be born next. And so it's important that we recognize this precious human birth for what our precious opportunity truly is. And once we've contemplated that, and we know just how precious this extraordinarily rare intersection of qualities and conditions is, once we truly recognize that and recognize how fortunate we are to have obtained it, then we can move our minds to the contemplation of impermanence and the impermanence of this precious opportunity. So this human body is not a permanent situation. The Buddha taught that all compounded things are impermanent. They have no true inherent existence. And because our bodies are composed of compounded elements, they are impermanent. And hopefully that isn't earth-shattering news to anyone here. We're all going to die. We know that. But we don't act like we know it. We spend our lives acquiring useless experiences and useless junk, chasing distraction after distraction without any wisdom guiding our actions. We cling to the idea that we have true inherent existence and that this existence is going to last. And we use concealer, collagen supplements, hair dye, and good old-fashioned denial to ignore the fact that our lives are passing very, very quickly. We make all kinds of plans for the future. We're convinced that we'll be here in 2020 and 2050. We'll be here decades from now. But we don't have any guarantee that we'll even be alive tomorrow, or that we'll even make it home alive from this teaching. There's no guarantee. So contemplating impermanence cuts through our denial, and it cuts through our worldly distractions by crystallizing in our minds the preciousness of every breath, of every moment, so that we can use our time wisely and actualize the most profound potential of this human life, which is to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. To contemplate impermanence, it's important to think about the impermanence of many different things, not just one's own mortality, although we do spend a good amount of time on that, but also the impermanence of all sentient beings' lives, the impermanence of the lives of our friends and family, of great spiritual leaders and powerful rulers, the impermanence of this earth and all other planets, the impermanence of our universe and even of time itself. All of these aspects of impermanence must be contemplated in great detail. It isn't enough to just have a surface understanding or to think about these things once or twice. In order to get the full benefit of this contemplation, we have to overcome our entrenched habits of denial and distraction. We've been practicing denial and distraction since time out of mind, so we have to really make a concerted effort to change that habit. To do that, we have to explore the impermanence of all compounded phenomena, the impermanence of everything that exists in cyclic existence. Really delve deep and spend some time on that. Gyaltrul Rinpoche says, the Vajra words taken from the root terma are as follows. Whosoever and whatsoever is born is impermanent and must die. These are Avalokiteshvara's exact words, and they mean that there are no exceptions to the truth of impermanence. No matter what caste or family one belongs to, no matter what kind of situation one is born into, no matter how much wealth one has accumulated, no matter what the case may be, if one has been born into this world, one's name has already been signed to the death certificate. It's certain that we will all die. Whosoever and whatsoever is born must die. As long as there is birth in cyclic existence, there is death. What is uncompounded is not impermanent. What is compounded is always impermanent. So it's said that the lifespan of beings is like a lightning flash in space, or like a waterfall quickly rushing down the side of a mountain. Our lives are over so quickly, before we know it. And like a waterfall, they only go in one direction. We don't get younger. Every one of us here used to be a cute little kid. We're not anymore, right? But we all used to be cute little kids, and we'd run around playing with our friends, and we had things that were so important to us, like, the Barbie doll we want that week, or whatever, this friend didn't want to sit next to me at lunch today, and that's so important. And, it's earth-shattering that this person didn't want to sit next to you at lunch, and who cares now? All that's gone. We used to be, I'm sure a lot of you remember, I used to be a little rugrat running around here, as did some of you. We used to be little rugrats hiding out in the cushions under the altar and just running around. And where are those cute little kids now? Where did they go? And everything that we try to possess, everything that we obtain in this life and then that we try to maintain over the course of our lives, our wealth, our status, career, relationships, friendships, The moment we die, all of those become meaningless. None of it does any good. Still, we spend most of our time pursuing those things, pursuing comfortable situations that we think will make us happy and that we think will last. We don't realize that we're like children building sandcastles. If you remember building sandcastles as a kid, you get so invested in them. You spent all this time building this really cool sandcastle, and then you imagine like the princesses and princes that'll live in that castle, and you start playing pretend games with it, and then a wave comes and washes it away, and you get so upset because you thought that castle was going to last. But the adults that are with you, your mom or dad or whoever, they're not upset when the wave comes and takes your sandcastle away. They never become invested in it in the first place because they know that that is a sandcastle and its nature is impermanent. They don't expect it to be permanent or real, so they don't develop any attachment to it. And so the wave washes it away and they say, whatever, let's have lunch. No big deal. No matter what kind of high position you're able to rise to, whether you're a CEO or president or king of the universe, you don't get to stay in that position. You don't get to stay there indefinitely. You will eventually fall from that position. As Trungpa Rinpoche said, what goes up must come down. Every friendship and relationship will also inevitably end. It's said that at the end of meeting comes separation, which is why you should always get a prenup. I really feel like there's a business out there for Buddhist divorce lawyers. Could be their tagline. At the end of meeting comes separation. I'm missing out on some big bucks. But seriously, whoever you meet, no matter how close you become, that meeting will bring separation. Whether through divorce or some other type of separation over the course of your life, you will part ways. And if you don't part ways during the course of your life, when you die, you definitely will part ways. And we know that. We even build it into our wedding vows. We say, till death do us part. Everything that comes together eventually comes apart. That's the way it goes. Gyaltrul Rinpoche says, it's really not such a big deal. So we meet and then we're separated. Obviously, if you consider that right now you're in a body composed of the 5 elements, you will understand that those elements have a certain life duration, a certain life expectancy, and eventually your body will start to reverse itself. As our body degenerates, we start to feel uncomfortable and stiff. Our hair goes gray, our teeth falls out, we lose our vision, we fall apart. We age. We totally fall apart. And then at the end of life comes death. If you consider this carefully, you'll see that you'll understand that even yourself, your being, your personality, everything about you that you think makes you you, all of that is impermanent too. There is nothing in samsara, in cyclic existence, that is permanent. Nothing. Knowing that our lives will not last, that our possessions will not last, our relationships will not last, our careers and reputations will not last, all of these things we spend so much time on. Knowing that all of these will not last, when we realize that to be the truth of things, we can recognize these sandcastles as sandcastles. And then we can invest our time building something that's actually worthwhile, and we can build a solid foundation for our spiritual practice. So as I mentioned before, to contemplate impermanence, it's important to contemplate the impermanence of everything, all sorts of things. Chagdud Tulku says, a mere theoretical understanding of impermanence won't have much impact on our life. Unless we truly assimilate its meaning through meditation, we will continue to grasp at things that will certainly fail us. One way to contemplate impermanence is to examine every aspect of your experience. The universe, the earth, your neighborhood, your relationships, your body, speech, and mind, your interests and values, your self-identity. See if you can find anything permanent in any of those. Just comb through them one by one. Think of every single thing about your experience and see if you can find anything that is permanent. We can start by thinking of the universe. Take the Big Bang Theory, for instance. So there was this big explosion and suddenly everything changed, right? After a while, there were galaxies and stars and planets, and eventually there was this planet, Earth. But Earth wasn't anything like it is today. This planet has always been changing, and it's still changing. And our universe even is still changing. There's still new galaxies being born, and nebulas being formed, and stars supernovaing, and entire galaxies disappearing when they do. All of this is constantly in flux. But if we think about this Earth did not seem, this Earth was not how it is today when it was formed. It hasn't been this way ever, really. It's been in a constant state of change up till now, and is continuing to change. Up until about 200 million years ago, this little piece of land that we call Maryland was pressed up against Mauritania, what's now called Mauritania, on the west coast of Africa. You could walk there. You could walk to the Sahara Desert from here. It's very far away now. And those continents pressing together, those formed the Appalachian Mountains. And at the time that those mountains formed, they grew to be the size of Mount Everest and the Himalayas. If you go up to the Catoctin Mountains now, if you go to Cunningham Falls and look at the Catoctin Mountain, there is a plaque there that talks about this. And it says, this mountain used to be as tall as Mount Everest. And you see it now, and this mountain is less than 2,000 feet tall. It is barely a mountain. I lived in Arizona for a decade, so I have a very different perspective on mountains than Maryland does, because I don't think anything in this state qualifies as a mountain. But definitely less than 2,000 feet, and it used to be like 30,000 feet. That's a big difference. This landscape has really changed. And about the time when the Appalachians were as tall as the Himalayas, that was about the time that 76% of all terrestrial and marine life species went extinct. Just one of the times that happened. Then came the dinosaurs, the T-Rex and the velociraptors and all of the other characters from Land Before Time. They were all there. Where are all those creatures now? They're extinct. They're in museums. They're in Steven Spielberg movies, and that's it. They're just legends. We can't even agree about what color they were. We don't even know whether a T-Rex, like you see different shows. I remember watching shows on dinosaurs in the 90s, and they would make the T-Rex green, and then now they make him brown, and then, sometimes he's kind of reddish purple, and it just depends on what the prevailing theory of the time is. Oh, he was really well camouflaged. Oh no, he was giant and never camouflaged. It's like things change. It's just legend now. There have been 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history, where 60 to 70% of all species disappeared. 5 times that has completely rolled over, and we have gotten a whole new batch of life. Whole new different set of playing cards. It could happen again. It could happen soon. It could happen within our lifetimes, if things continue in the direction they're going. We don't save the bees. Got to save the bees so this doesn't happen. So everyone is bound to die. There's no reason why we couldn't have another mass extinction in our lifetimes, because we know we're bound to die. It might happen that way. So next we can think about all the beings of the universe and their inevitable deaths. How many people born 100 years ago are still alive? Maybe like 1 or 2. There's a couple out there. Some people live to be like 115 somehow. But how many of us alive today will be alive 100 years from now? Unlikely. Unlikely. Think of whatever historical figures you're familiar with. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Mansa Musa, Abraham Lincoln, JFK, Princess Diana, all of these people that had so much power and wealth and prestige and fame, and they're just legends now. They're gone. None of that extended their life. None of that helped them at all when they died. Nagarjuna wrote, "Life flickers in the flurries of 1,000 ills, more fragile than a bubble in a stream. In sleep, each breath departs and is again drawn in. How wondrous that we wake up living still." There is no guarantee that any one of us will take our next breath. We take our lives for granted. We wake up every morning in good health, or at least decent health, and that is a miraculous event that we just take for granted every single day. We all know that we're going to die, but we assume that it'll be a long way off, and we assume that it'll be after we finish all the things that we want to do. And if you ask someone, do you think you'll die someday? They'll say, of course, everyone dies. And you say, do you think you'll die soon? No, I hope not. Or they'll say, well, I doubt it because I'm pretty young, or, I'm in good health, or I've got all these big plans for my life, well, I've always wanted to start a family and have kids, and I've got this great job, and so, I won't die anytime soon. I'll definitely retire first. Everyone has these ideas, all these things you want to do, and you think that death actually will wait for those. But we could die tomorrow. We don't know. It's just our wish that death will wait for those, but there's no guarantee. And there's no place that you can go that you won't die. There's no place that you can hide from death. There's a story of Patrul Rinpoche that he once was staying in a nomad encampment, and the family that took him in thought he was just a homeless beggar or maybe a thief, and so they gave him a lice-filled sheepskin and told him to just stay put in that corner over there. And they had no idea that he's Patrul Rinpoche, and Patrul Rinpoche, of course, is too humble to ever tell anyone who he is. So he just thanks them and sits in the corner with his lice-filled sheepskin. And then when they all went to bed, the mother found a louse in her bed. And she gave it to her daughter, and she said, "Here, wrap this up in a piece of wool for the night so it doesn't get cold, and then in the morning, take it outside and put it someplace safe out of the sun. Throw it somewhere where it won't die." And then Patrul Rinpoche sits up in bed, and he says, "Throw it someplace where it won't die? If there is such a place, then kindly please throw me there too." But there isn't anywhere that we can escape from death. It will find us anywhere. So next we can think of the impermanence of holy beings. So the extraordinary masters of the past, the 8 great Dharma kings, the 25 disciples of Padmasambhava, Buddha Shakyamuni himself, none of them are here any longer. They're not here. Such beings are considered to be beyond birth and death, but they choose to die to remind sentient beings of impermanence. And Chagdud Tulku says, "This doesn't mean that their blessings died with their physical bodies, for the positive qualities of enlightened mind pervade the 3 times of past, present, and future. But from our individual perspective, they have disappeared. Just as when the world turns, it appears to us that the sun has set." We can also think of the impermanence of the texts and other supports. We can think of the Chinese Cultural Revolution and all of the temples and texts and statues and precious relics that were destroyed. We can think of the great Samye Monastery, which was consecrated by Padmasambhava himself, and after multiple civil wars, an earthquake, and numerous fires, none of the original buildings are left. It has been rebuilt again and again and again after each disaster. And we can think of this temple that we sit in today and how it's falling down around us. And we need to build a new temple. But we can see even here, when we come to practice, we have a very wonderful example of impermanence right here in our place of practice. And that, if you want, maybe you can go to the community room and you can see the holes in the ceiling that have opened there, because the building is impermanent and this building is going to fall down. And so we have to come to terms with that, no matter how painful that may be, no matter how attached we may be to this building and the way it is. I remember being very surprised when all of a sudden there was wood floors and green walls in this room, and I found that very difficult to wrap my head around. This room looked one way for a very long time. Before that, it looked different, though. And before that, it looked different. And eventually this building won't be here anymore at all. But hopefully by then we'll have our beautiful new space. And then we can start practicing our thoughts of impermanence again. So next we can think of the impermanence of those in positions of power. We can think of the powerful people of this world, emperors, kings, presidents, heads of state, military commanders. Despite all their worldly power and influence, they have no power over death. We can think of the various gods, such as Indra, Brahma, and Vishnu. They also will die. In the end, no matter how much power you have, even if you develop crazy powers of clairvoyance and you can fly in the sky, or you can levitate, or any other powers that magical powers you might develop, you will not be able to escape death. We can think of the country of Tibet, and I'm sure there's many other countries that we could use as examples, but the country of Tibet once exercised power across, large regions of India and China and Tajikistan and all these other areas in Asia. And now, Tibet does not have that much power. Tibet's under China's thumb now. So that's changed, that once was a great kingdom that now has very little autonomy, very little power. Many countries have seen that ebb and flow of power. Everywhere you look, there is impermanence. We can watch the 4 seasons change and see that everything is impermanent. Just yesterday, it was snowing. Today, it's 63 degrees out. And soon, the crocuses and the daffodils will be popping up if they haven't begun doing that already. And the weather will get hotter and hotter, and the fields will turn green, and soon it'll be so hot and humid we won't remember what winter's like, and we'll think, man, that was so nice when it snowed that one day in March. And then, right now the fields are empty. There's just these desiccated stalks of corn, but then soon those will all the corn stalks will be taller than us, and it'll just be mazes of corn everywhere, and then that season will end, and the farmers will harvest the corn, and the fields will look barren again, and it'll get cooler. And the fruit and the flowers will dry up, and then it'll snow again. We know this. We see this every year. Guru Padmasambhava said, last year, this morning, this evening, days and nights are constantly changing, teaching us the truth of impermanence. There are other examples of impermanence all around us. When I was growing up, this was a rural area, very rural. A number of you probably remember this better than I do, but Poolsville used to be a real one-horse town. And now it's featured in Time magazine as one of Washington, D.C.'s best commuter districts, with a magnet high school that draws kids from all over the county. Who would have thought? I feel like driving around Montgomery County, every time I blink, another field is turned into a suburban development or some micro-urban play space. And it's just, like the downtown Crown. That used to be a field. All the developments across the street from the downtown Crown used to be a field. All of the streets connecting you to all those places used to be fields. None of those roads were even there when I was a kid. those neighborhood roads and all the neighborhoods that have sprung up. My husband remembers the fields and forests that were chopped down to build Route 200. That used to be just like field connected to field connected to field. Now it's just roadways everywhere. We pave things over in cement, and then we think it looks permanent. It looks like it was never anything other than this concrete land, right? You don't even know anymore. It can be a new development that pops up. I walked around Kentlands recently, and there's a new part of Kentlands, which it's technically new construction, but the way they've built it and with the trees growing up, it looks like it could have been there for 50 years. You wouldn't really know. It's easy to just become fooled by the way that we build this world to look permanent. We build everything to give us the appearance of permanence. But then if we really think about it, we can remember that, hey, a couple years ago, that was a field. That didn't used to be there. And in a little while, that building's going to crumble, and no one will remember that it was ever there. So just walking around, driving around, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset, watching the flowers pop up in the spring, we can see these things and they can remind us of impermanence. And they can also remind us then, as we can move along in our contemplations, they can remind us then also of the uncertainty of the circumstances of our own death. Everything is impermanent, and it's also uncertain. Every being is sure to die, but how, why, when, and where, we can't predict that. So we can think about all the many ways that we could die. We could die in our sleep tonight. You could go out for a nice dinner and come home and go to bed and never wake up in the morning. Or you could die at the restaurant. You could choke on your food. Or you could die on your way home from the restaurant. You could die in a car accident. There's any number of ways that you could die. You could have an aneurysm right here and right now. There was a news story I read a few years ago of a man who was asleep in his bed. I think this was in Florida. He was asleep in bed, and all of a sudden, a sinkhole opened up right beneath his bedroom and swallowed him whole, and he died. He never saw that coming. You don't think that's going to happen to you. He didn't think it was going to happen to him either. You don't know. Could not predict that. Gyaltrul Rinpoche says, there are so many causes for death that one's life is like a candle in a windstorm. At any moment, it can be snuffed out. The moment when any of these numerous causes of death might occur is entirely unpredictable. Some die in the womb, some die right after birth. Some children die before they learn to walk or right after they learn to walk. Some die young, some die old. Some die while they are waiting for medical care. Some get medical care and they linger on and on and on, and they're nothing more than skeletons, really, in bed. Many die suddenly or by accident while eating or talking or driving or working. Patrul Rinpoche says, you should be quite sure that when you are going to die is unpredictable, and that there is no knowing where you will be born next. We should meditate on death all the time, in every circumstance. Every time we see something that reminds us of impermanence, we can think, yes, and me too. I'm also impermanent. My body is also impermanent. My life is also impermanent. Gyaltrul Rinpoche says, while standing up, sitting, or lying down, tell yourself, this is my last act in the world, and meditate on it with utter conviction. On your way to wherever you might be going, say to yourself, maybe I will die there. There is no certainty that I will ever come back. When you set out on a journey or pause to rest, ask yourself, will I die here? Wherever you are, you should wonder if this might be where you die. At night, when you lie down, ask yourself whether you might die in bed during the night, or whether you can be sure that you're going to get up in the morning. When you rise, ask yourself whether you might die sometime during the day. and reflect that there is no certainty at all that you will be going to bed in the evening. And there are stories of the masters of the past that would contemplate so thoroughly on impermanence that each night when they went to bed, they would turn their bowl upside down on their nightstand, and that's a symbol in Tibet, like when someone dies, you turn their bowl upside down. And so they would do that every night when they would go to bed. They would turn their bowl upside down because they thought, who knows, I might die. I'll save others the trouble. So we don't just meditate on death to bum ourselves out, though. I know it sounds really depressing, but that's not why we meditate on death. Meditating on death alone is not enough. We have to pair this with the thought of our precious human rebirth. We have to remember that the only thing of any use at the moment of our death is the Dharma, and that the only thing that follows us at death is our positive and negative actions, our karma. So then, when we meditate on death, it will spur us to practice in an authentic way. If we remember that all of our worldly activities are transient and meaningless, and that our human body is on loan and could disappear at any moment, and that the only worthwhile thing to do with our time is to practice the Dharma, if we can keep all of that in mind, then we will use our life well, and we will use it directing every step towards the Dharma. Geshe Patawa said, think about death and impermanence for a long time. Once you are certain that you are going to die, you will no longer find it hard to put aside harmful actions, nor difficult to do what is right. After that, meditate for a long time on love and compassion. Once love fills your heart, you will no longer find it hard to act for the benefit of others. Then meditate for a long time on emptiness, the natural state of all phenomena. Once you fully understand emptiness, you will no longer find it hard to dispel all your delusions. So though meditating on death and impermanence seems like a real bummer and really depressing, knowing that each moment could be our last puts things in perspective. We won't think so much about the imperfections of our existence when death is right around the corner. If you've ever spent time with someone who really does know that they're going to die any moment, like someone who is terminally ill, they tend to have a lot more peace about the little things that happen in the day. If they've come to an acceptance of death, some people get real close and are terminally ill and they still push the thought of death away. But when you know that you are about to die, the little things that pop up, they don't matter as much. So when we know our loved ones could die at any moment, we're not going to waste our time quarreling with them. When we know our life could end any moment, we won't waste it on useless things. As Chagdud Tulku says, reflecting on impermanence changes our habit of clinging to things as stable and immutable. For example, when we buy a new car, we can remember that it's just a box of rust waiting to happen. And then our attachment to it will diminish. Or when we meet someone really wonderful and we think they're the one, that's a good time to remember impermanence too. And you can also think about impermanence when you're in pain or you're suffering from grief. In those situations, impermanence is a very friendly thought. You can remember that this too will end, this too will pass. It's not always bad news that things are impermanent. It also means that our pain will end, our suffering will end. And it's not so depressing, it's just reality. It's the truth of our experience. It's no different than saying that fire is hot or water is wet. If we understand these things to be true, then we can move on with our lives and interact with things in a way that makes sense. Accepting that this is the way things are cures us of our wishful thinking. When you internalize the awareness of impermanence, all of your clinging and self-cherishing will decrease. Right now, we cling to objects, we cling to our possessions, we cling to our bodies and our idea of self. We even cling to others' bodies, we cling to the way that we think, someone gets a new haircut and we get, oh, you changed your hair. Oh, you did this. I'm so wrapped up in the way that you were yesterday, But as we contemplate impermanence, all of these habitual tendencies will begin to decrease. Gyaltrul Rinpoche says, because all these things are impermanent, and when you understand the truth of impermanence, naturally the way you relate to everything will change. Thinking, I want this. I really need to have this or that thing. I want this diamond ring. I want that piece of jewelry. I've got to have this or I won't be happy. I can't be satisfied until I have it. The mind force behind that attachment and compulsion, that attraction to objects, will be cut off from the base if you hold the truth of impermanence in your mind stream. Desire in and of itself is not so harmful. The problem is the mental attitude that motivates it, which is the belief that through possessing the object of our desire, we will obtain lasting happiness. So that can't happen, though. Any desire object that we fixate upon is impermanent, and the joy that it brings us is therefore impermanent too. So when that desire attachment arises, you can simply watch it. And if you watch that desire arise with a mind that knows impermanence, that understands impermanence, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you don't understand impermanence, then your mind will believe that through obtaining that desire object, you will obtain lasting happiness. Some kind of happiness or satisfaction will be achieved. And then when that doesn't happen, because it can't happen, you will think that there's some other object to be had that will bring you lasting happiness. And that's where the problem is. Your inability to be content, to be satisfied, is due to that mistaken mentality. Because you think that that object brings you happiness, when it doesn't, and you just look to another object, which doesn't bring you happiness, so you look to another object, which doesn't bring you happiness, and you just keep relying on that cycle. Our continual reliance on that cycle of desire reaffirms our belief in an independently existing self. That is the subject that we believe will be fulfilled by these desire objects. So this situation perpetuates the mind of duality, of self and others. And as long as that duality exists, we will have the 5 poisons, and we will be giving rise to the 5 poisons: hatred, greed, ignorance, pride, and jealousy. And fueled by those 5 poisons, we'll spend our lives accumulating negative actions and negative habits. And then what happens to our precious human birth? Then our precious human birth becomes nothing but a vessel through which we accumulate negative karma. And that's what we bring with us at the time of death. So contemplating impermanence, we can come to understand the meaning of this precious human birth and determine not to waste it. Gyaltrul Rinpoche asks, have you wasted a lot of your life until now? Are you thinking about that now? Or are you busy thinking about new projects ahead? You should spend more time contemplating the impermanence of life, not new projects. You really think that up until now you have been involved with extremely important projects and that your endeavors have been crucial to your existence and to the existence of others. But is that really the case? Think very carefully about what all that effort has produced. How has it affected others? Isn't it the case that the importance we ascribe to our projects and endeavors is really only in our own minds? What would happen if we didn't have so many projects? It's important to really contemplate this. First, to contemplate the preciousness of this human birth, and then to contemplate impermanence. And then, after contemplating impermanence, to contemplate our precious human birth, and to keep going between those. And these 2 contemplations are of the most benefit when they are united. You can truly appreciate the preciousness of this human birth through an understanding of impermanence. And you can appreciate impermanence through understanding how rare the occasion of this human life is. Once we've become thoroughly permeated with the thought of impermanence, we've really soaked it up, then we should be like the Geshe that went to meditate in the mountains. And in front of his cave, there was this big thorn bush. And as he went into his cave, the thorn caught on his robes, and he thought, boy, I should really cut that thorn bush down. That's going to get really annoying. But his next thought was, well, I might die in this cave, so it's obviously more important that I focus on my practice. So he focused on his practice. And then when he left the cave, the thorn bush caught on his robes, and he thought, man, that thorn bush is getting really annoying. I should cut it down. But then the thought occurred to him, I might die before I return to the cave. It's definitely more important to focus on my practice. And then when he returned to the cave, it caught on his clothes, and he thought, I should cut it down, but it's more important to focus on my practice because I could die at any moment. And he just kept remembering that every single time that came up of, oh, that's my little project to do. I should cut that thorn bush down. He remembered that actually he could die at any moment, and so he better use his time wisely. So it went on every day like that, passing the thorn bush, putting off the thought of cutting it down for many years until he was an accomplished master. So if we do that, if we think of that every time we want to Marie Kondo our house or whatever other projects we want to do, we'll be accomplished in no time. So as usual, we're going to end our class with a brief meditation to stabilize our minds. And Jetsma says, no one can get rid of desire, get rid of pride, or get rid of anger if there is not enough stability and spaciousness to look at what is in one's mind, to see how we are acting, and to see what it is going to bring about. There must be a little space to do that. We have to be able to step back from minds long enough to watch our reactions happen, and to see where they come from, and to see where they lead, so that we're not swept up by them. So for this reason, we do the practice of stabilizing the mind. And this way we'll have enough space in our minds to see when we turn onto a new road, hey, this road wasn't here 5 years ago. This is a reminder of impermanence. Hey, look at that new wrinkle on my face. That's a reminder of impermanence. Look at that gray hair. That's great. What a great reminder of impermanence. If you don't have that space, then you'll just freak out. But so for this meditation, this is a meditation you can do anytime, and we're just going to focus on our breath. So you can sit up with our backs straight. You can put your hands in your lap, just gently relaxed, and allow yourself to breathe normally and relax completely. Let's get my phone to start a little timer. All right. So we're not going to try to control our breath at all. Just breathe naturally and put the most gossamer thin attention on your breath. It's like taking your pulse. You don't put any pressure on it. You just observe it. Your attention should be like a feather, gently riding on the surface of your breath. And then when your thoughts try to distract you, just let them go. Don't tell yourself to stop thinking or try to replace them with blissful thoughts. Just say, just see the thought and let it go. Just drop it. Drop the thought and just return to that gossamer thin attention on your breath. So we'll go for 5 minutes. Okay, so that's a meditation that you can do at any time. And I definitely recommend doing it all the time. So you can really stabilize our minds. And then we can use everything in our lives to remind us of these Dharma ideas. If we have enough space in our minds, then we can really make sure that we're using every moment in a way that will benefit ourselves and others. So now we're just going to do a dedication prayer. We'll do Jetsuma's dedication.
By this effort,
may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms. All right, thank you.